Good afternoon, everyone. So our next speaker is Kylie Watson from DXC. She's talking about leveraging military models and cyber warfare strategies to improve cybersecurity in an organisation. Please make Kylie welcome.
So hi everyone, I'm here today to talk about being under attack and a whole bunch of things that we need to be mindful of in that scenario. Why am I qualified to talk about it? Some of you know me, many don't. I spent 10 years in the Australian Army. I then spent the next 20 years consulting back to NatSec and the Australian Army and obviously Defence, and then more broadly, at the moment, I look after 22 countries across commercial, defence, government, and I run 5 security operations centres in region. So I look after a region that we call APJ-MEA. So it's the typical APJ, India, Greater China, Japan, ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand, plus I also look after the Middle East and Africa. So it makes the job pretty interesting and challenging. And there's a lot of things that I've learned in my early career. In the first 10 years, I joined the Army when I was 17. There was a lot of things I learned there, and a lot of things from a war-fighting perspective that I really think we can take with us into cybersecurity. So I've been doing this with my teams to build resilience. One of my most frustrating things is I don't have approval yet to go to the next level of technical detail. So I do have that on a whole bunch of things that we can do from a technical perspective, but of course I've got to get approval for that from the right people. I don't want to lose my security clearance by sharing stuff with you that is not approved. So I'm hoping to come back here next year or somewhere else before then and share a bit of a deeper dive on the technical. But to start with, I want to flick to something that we're all pretty familiar with, I imagine. Military context, Kashmir. So a few weeks ago, I was in my office and I got a call and it said, Kylie, we've had to enact the business continuity plans for India. I've got 2 SOCs in India. One is domestic market, so it looks after Bank of Baroda, Bank of India, various other Indian companies. And the other looks after APJ-MEA, so when people offshore. So Australian companies, Japanese companies, Taiwanese companies. So all of a sudden, we had to go look at the business continuity, which included relocation of some pretty critical roles. It included failover, redundancy, all the usual things you would suspect. What it also means is the team is in hypercare mode. They're in constant hypercare mode, and I don't know when that's going to turn off, right? So I was talking to Lieutenant General Susan Coyle last week. If any of you know her, and I'll talk a little bit more about her command. She is responsible for cybersecurity, and she said, look, there's a whole bunch of things we need to do to take all the models that you talk about and all the things that we have in the military, but at the end of the day, it's about being a good leader and enacting some of these strategies. So I do have, and we'll share some of those with you, but right now I'm doing that with a team of people. I've got about 1,000 people across my region. There's probably about 150 in India that I'm having to look after now, who are very, very much at the forefront. Our attacks, malicious attacks, have gone up over 1,000%. We stopped counting at 1,000%, right? So you can imagine how much under pressure and how busy that team is. So I'm able to lean in and use some of those strategies to keep that team functioning. But from a leadership perspective, I also want to keep them healthy and happy at work, right? And that becomes difficult in this environment. So what is this environment? If we have a look, global context. Now, you all know a bunch of these conflicts going on. Russia, Ukraine, Middle East tensions, US-China rivalry, India-Pakistan, we've mentioned. But interestingly, okay, a lot of this is going on. Did you know that we have more conflict now than ever before since World War II? So currently we have 92 conflicts according to the Global Peace Index right now. And that's not just these ones. If you have a look just down the bottom there, and it's cut off a little bit of it, but Sudan and Ethiopia, they're not usually top of mind, not usually in the media. We do hear about these others, and you can see this is the countries with the most casualties last year. And obviously that's constantly changing. but there are many more in there. So if any of you are interested in that, you can actually find that data. So what does that actually mean? It means that we have to think about keeping up. And I do want to thread a little bit about AI in the conversation too, because keeping up is really important in the face of AI. But how does this relate to us in Australia? The defence context. So Joint Capabilities Group, anyone here know Joint Capabilities Group, know about them, know what they do? No, one or two? Okay, they are the warfighting domain that look after cybersecurity. They also look after space, and I'll explain a bit about why that is. And they have a newly created role. So they have a Lieutenant General, Susan Coyle, who runs the team. They have Cyber Command, they have Space Command, they have teaching and training, and they have logistics. And the 2023 Defence Strategic Review, they have reviews every now and again just to see, so a lot of money goes into defence. Are we spending it correctly? Are we doing the right thing? Are we positioned correctly for Australia and what we need to do in our national defence? And they looked at it and realised, actually, we're not positioned very well at all, not just in cybersecurity, but also physically in infrastructure. So they appointed Major General Jason Walk under Susan. They only appointed him at the beginning of this year. And it's a little bit scary, and I do get told by Lieutenant General Michelle McGuinness, who's speaking tomorrow morning, Kylie, stop scaring people, okay? And I'll try not to scare you too much. But if you have a look at the South Pacific and the dominance there that's going on with China and the infrastructure issues and the struggles, the traditional relationship has been Australia and New Zealand. That has shifted. They are giving lots of different military equipment to that region. They are improving jetties, they're improving infrastructure, they're in there. Then you think about the conversations about the Darwin port, you look at the Pilbara and just how important that is to our economic certainty, and you start to get a picture of why Australia suddenly went, oh, wake up, hey, we actually need someone to look at Australian interests. What are we going to do to strengthen Australia's position in this global context and with what's going on in the world? We need resilient national infrastructure. How are we going to do this? So that has all been linked in, of course, with cybersecurity and space as well, and become a little clear in a minute why. But when we first started thinking about this domain, it wasn't really until the Gulf War that we realised electronic warfare was a major factor. Estonia's 2007 cyber attack showed that an entire country could be taken down digitally. We all see Estonia up there as being one of the most leading-edge cybersecurity countries in the world. Well, look at their neighbours and look at what happened to them. I'm sure we would be the same if the same thing had happened to us. And then in 2010, the US Department of Defence went, you know what? Cybersecurity is actually a warfare thing. It belongs in the domain of warfare. Cybersecurity is warfare. So Australia had a look at this and we followed. And it was a good thing to follow. So if we have a look at fifth frontier, there's a thing called the fifth frontier of war. And in war, we have land, okay, obviously army, maritime, navy, air, obviously air force, the best one's army. Space, okay, space has emerged. Space is considered. Last week, I was talking to the head of Space Command and he said it is not only congested, there's so many satellites up there, it's crazy, but it's also contested. He said it is definitely contested. We are seeing so many attempts to take our satellites down. And also the military use civilian satellites as well because they can't go and stick up their own all the time. So it becomes very difficult to work out where the exact threats are and how you monitor them because they're mixed in with the commercial space too, particularly with the LEO satellites. And then cyberspace, right? So you can see there the definition of that, and I think we all know what cyberspace is in this room. I would hope we would. Sorry, my clicker's a bit slow. So then there's AI. I didn't mention AI in the title, but it's really important to focus on that in the current context. Everyone talks about it, and I'll also bust a few myths around it too. But essentially, we can't fall behind in cybersecurity at all, in the military either. And there's a lot that we can learn from the military in the civilian space for this. So when we look at AI and the warfighter, How is AI impacting the military? There's enhanced situational awareness, right? You need situational awareness when you're in the military, when you're in the warfighter space. You need to have improved decision making, so AI can help with that. Obviously, autonomous systems, we really don't want people getting killed in war. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But you know, these conflicts in these contests probably should remain more political or perhaps more on the landscape and the environment. Believe it or not, there really isn't a drive to actually try to kill people. We're trying to get away from that. But autonomous systems is very, very complex. Precision targeting makes sense. Information warfare, including deepfakes, and I'll show you something on deepfakes shortly, and data poisoning ability. All of these things are not just what the warfighter needs. We actually need these in cybersecurity. Okay, in Australia, it's probably illegal to do, go in and do offensive and go and do data poisoning, right? We have to be more on the defensive side. But at the end of the day, we can take quite a few lessons and look at this environment and go, hey, actually, this applies to my environment as well. So even autonomous systems with the AI, right? Precision targeting, we need to make sure we know where the malicious actors are and be able to target them to be able to take them out or lock them down or be able to take out a server and rebuild it. We need to know which one. So all of these things can be taken and used for us. So AI can be used against you, okay? So it's great, but we all know it can be used against you. And so a concept I want to introduce is decision superiority. It's a military term, decision superiority. It means what it looks like it means, right? We want to be able to make really fast, good decisions under pressure. And with AI coming through, that's exactly what we need. So if I go a little bit more to the civvy context, and civvy, sorry, military, civilians, essentially non-military. It's no different for us in cyber. And so if you have a look here, you all know this, right? AI assistants are poised to outnumber humans. You will hear this spoken about today and tomorrow. You hear it at other conferences. We're all talking about it. It is crazy how much we're going to have many more machines and authentication and that than we do humans. It's something we talk about in digital identity all the time. How do we deal with this sprawl? How do we actually work with this? Because AI is proliferating it. But not just that, it's in our everyday lives. So this was a photo I took in Canberra. So I live in Canberra. I'm based in Singapore, but I have a home in Canberra. And I just wanted to show a picture of Drone Show. That was one that was taken 2 years ago. And you remember fireworks, the danger potentially of fireworks, they're banned in most places now. When I was younger, we could just go let them off. But these days, you can't do that anywhere unless you go to Bali on New Year's Eve, which is a whole other thing. But it's safer, right? And the AI built into the drones is very much accounting for speed, it's counting for wind, it's counting for light, it's counting for where the crowds are, and the best placement doesn't necessarily have to be over a lake or over somewhere, that's particularly restricted. It's more flexible. So they have to look at all of these things, and be able to have a fantastic, exciting, entertaining thing. So that's not something that, from a cybersecurity perspective is, potentially you could take that down. I don't really think that would impact too many people, be very low risk. But I just wanted to get across to you and that. And then in the next thing, just about how pervasive it is. So I did a number of deepfakes of myself. And this was about 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, it was pretty sophisticated. Now, what I'm going to show you is just the deepfakes I did back then. And then I'll talk a little bit about what's happening now. So is that me or is that deepfake? So is it real or not? Real? Who thinks it's real? Yep. Okay, that one's real. What about this one? Is this real? Nah. Nah. What about this one? No? Yep. This one? No, that's not real. This one? It's real? It is real. They're pretty hard to detect. What about this one? No, this one got picked up on LinkedIn because I had a bet with my boss that nobody would be able to pick it. And he went, yeah, they'll be able to pick it. That's not you. So I stuck it on LinkedIn for a day. You should see how much it shared. I took it down after a day. It is prolific. When I speak somewhere, everybody picks that one up. And I've just given up ringing them and contacting them and going, no, that was a deep fake that I did for a conference, rah, rah, rah. So I actually like the picture, but it's not me. This one? No, that's not me either. And lastly, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that is me. So the other day, we were doing a scenario-based tabletop, and it was for a pretty big company. And we tend to do pretty sophisticated at DXC, but they went, we want video, and we want video of you in it, and your people in it, and our people in it, and we want all of this, and you need to get a videographer. And I had a look at the contract, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to cost a huge amount of dollars, and we've got to book in times for everyone, and they needed it done in the next week. And I was like, how are we going to make this happen? So I'm off trying to contact videographers, and we're getting quotes. And my head of DFIR, Jacob Wilson, goes, oh, Kylie, I need 10 minutes with you. And I was like, okay, we need to fit him in. Something must have happened. And he jumps on and he goes, here you go. And he had an entire suite of videos that were deep fake of everyone. He even had me doing a news reading thing just to show what he could do. He had people, he'd got their permission, but he had people in this particular scenario. And he did that. It took him about 2 to 3 hours to do that. And there were 5 injects, and each inject had a video that was a deep fake that looked pretty real. Yeah, and the customer will know that that's not really them, it's an AI thing, but it was real enough to get away with not having to pay a videographer, right? So we saved the customer tons of money. So it's really progressed. So I did these about 2 years ago. This was injects for a cyber simulation exercise done in a few hours. So imagine what we can do with deep fakes, and you've seen the nefarious things that are being done, particularly at the police are having to do with, and we work very closely with every Australian police force in this space as well. So it is prolific. So what are some insights from what I'm seeing out on the ground? And I think I see quite a lot. There's 22 countries that I'm working with, and then I link back into our US and our Europe and our UK businesses. So I'm seeing at the moment a lot of confusion in the cyberspace, and this relates to military as well, and it'll become clearer about the confusion. But people are still confusing automation and predictive analytics with AI. It's frustrating, as I'm sure you all have it as well. It's like, no, that's automation. That is not AI. OEMs are still applying rules that can skew results. So there was a recent software company where I'm friends with the owner. It's a fairly small Australian company, and they do a gauge on teams, and whether teams are healthy, happy, and they get results. And what they did was they implemented automatic reporting, and they used AI to do it. So they said, okay, we're going to extract a report so someone can just quickly run a report and go, how are my people feeling? What's going on in this particular area and that particular area? And they gave it a bunch of rules. They realised in the testing they didn't have the data to meet the rules, so it was making stuff up. And the stuff it was making up was rather bizarre. So a lot of testing has to happen in this case, but you can see an everyday scenario where the OEMs have to be very, very careful about the rules they're applying and what they're doing. We've talked about the rise in attacks. I talked about the India Security Operations Centres that I'm particularly impacted by at the moment. And we all know about the democratisation, right? Ransomware as a service, that type of thing. OEM roadmaps with AI. My goodness, every OEM says they're now a platform and they do everything. And they also do AI. I took my CTO with me to a digital identity one recently who unveiled this big roadmap. We've got AI, we're fantastic. And I said, this just sounds amazing. I really need you to unpick this for me. So we got the global head for this digital identity firm in a room with our CTO, and he started to ask a few questions, and then, this is why I really like him, he goes, you don't have AI. That's not AI at all. You need to say we're on an AI roadmap. That's in 12 to 18 months, but you need to stop selling to people that you've got AI. So you lift under the hood, and they don't really have it, a lot of them yet. So we need to be really careful of that as well. Increase in false positives, really annoying. And then you can see there, I just took a stat from the Digital Pulse. The adoption of AI in Australia is failing behind international competitors. So we've only just put in Jason Walk, a Major General, to look after our national interests from cybersecurity and an infrastructure perspective. And then we're also considered as being behind, and this is in the civilian side of things. So it is a little bit scary, but it's navigable. The type of attacks I'm seeing are deep fakes, data poisoning, smarter human engineering. We all see that, right? With ChatGPT in particular, people from English as a second language can make something seem even more sophisticated, particularly getting the vulnerable. Supply chain. So DXC is a third-party provider, and we do 2 reports on our cybersecurity posture, right? So 2 independent reports. Yet everybody else does their own independent reports, which is great. We want everyone to go do your own independent reports, but do you know how much time we run around chasing and trying to provide ours, and they go, no, we want ours, not yours. And that's because 55% of attacks are third party. 55%, more than half. So as a third-party provider, yeah, it's frustrating, but I understand, right? Because we also have that problem ourselves, because we also have people that provide to us. And I'm also, probably not mentioned at the beginning, I'm also the CISO for DXC, APJ MIA. So I wear 2 hats. I'm also looking after a traditional CISO role, and then out there in the consulting services space. So yeah, it can get quite complex. Polymorphic malware, found some of this the other week in a customer in Malaysia, and they had been told by the ransomware company that we're in there, and they're like, no, you're not, we can't find anything, please publish something to show us what you've got. And when they published it, they were like, there's no way they could be in there, and they went in and they did everything and they could not find it, right? Then it twigged with us about 2 or 3 days later that it was polymorphic malware. So it is out there. It is scary. It is very difficult to detect. And even if you know they've been in there, the ability for them to be able to hide themselves within your systems is getting more and more sophisticated, particularly with AI, because they can see what you're doing, so it adapts to what you're doing to then further hide. And it's one of those things where you might be looking for a robber, right? Someone's robbed your house and you run down the street and looking for the robber, but then the robbers changed their clothes, right? And then they look like they go into one house, but actually they've gone into another house, and they're able to continually evade you. So it's a little bit scary. And then the democratization of code, which I've mentioned before, particularly with Gen AI. So that all leads to the concept that I mentioned before about decision superiority. We need decision superiority just like the military does. I think we need it just as much. I think our cyber teams are tired. I think the threats are coming more and more, and I think we really need to do something about it, and I'm not seeing enough being done. I'm seeing lots of rigidity, lots of not embracing innovation, lots of not adopting models. People are just overwhelmed and just a little bit over it. So how do we get this decision superiority? We need to look back at the brain. So Yerkes-Dodson law. Anyone know Yerkes-Dodson law? 1908? Yep. It's very old, right? But it was pretty cool that they came up with this. Performance can increase with psychological pressure. It can increase with being mentally alert and stimulated and being under stress. So your performance can increase. However, it is proven, and has never been disproven, I think all of us in the room know this, that it's a certain point, right? There's a breaking point for everybody, and we need to be aware of what that breaking point is. So I spoke about hypercare in my teams in India. I'm very aware and exploring now, because I've never, as a CISO, actually had this issue where we've been impacted by a war. So it's something that I'm learning as well as I go, and how do I actually find that point where the teams are not exhausted? And so I am applying some of these military decision-making models that I'll cover. So imagine the warfighter experience, right? The brain under pressure for a warfighter. This picture here shows you the 5 areas of warfare. I've pinched this picture from Lockheed Martin, who are really good at highlighting it. But think about the fact that you have to talk to everybody. So land, sea, air, cyberspace, all have to talk to everybody all at the same time under pressure. And that you need the latest data, the latest information. You're on multiple fronts, right? There's lots of different, you're not operating in isolation. They call it joint command and joint logistics. And then it might not just be your country, it's another country as well. And then they might speak another language. And, it's really, really difficult. I've been in this space, and you have to make fast, quick, good decisions under pressure. And I give an example of, you've got a soldier lying there injured. They need to be airlifted out. Right? They absolutely have to be. But there's enemy surrounding. And you want to save this person. Instance I've seen, a 21-year-old needing to be medevaced out and, looking like they're going to die if they're not medevaced out. And you've got to make a decision because you're surrounded and you've got to protect the other troops. So you've got to make a good decision. You've got SATCOMs, which are 2,000 kilometres away. So it's very difficult for someone to take down satellite communications at the moment. It has been done by the US when it was all... it was a satellite that was aging and needed to be taken out, but it's very difficult because they move very fast and it's very difficult to take them out. So you've got SATCOMs, right? You know that that's your certainty. You know the naval ship is offshore and it's got a missile range of 1,600 kilometres away. Tomahawk missile can do that. Then you've got the Air Force, which has got about 1,000 kilometre range. You've got to think about the safety in this space of everybody as well, right? So because there's anti-aircraft missiles around as well, and there's a few, and they're only a few hundred kilometres away. It's difficult. You have to work out what to do. You have to know. You have to talk to everybody. You have to work out what is the best scenario. Now, the best scenario is a helicopter to get in. So you have to provide support to that helicopter. But you have to work out, is it the Navy ship? What if the Navy ship missile, targets and then they're not talking to the Air Force who are then coming over and they accidentally get them, right? All of this has to be, you see it in, a lot of you probably play video games and stuff, right? We see this stuff. It happens in real life. So you have to talk to each other to be able to evacuate. Yes, he got evacuated and yes, he's fine now. But it's a situation. Can you imagine being in command of that platoon and having to make that decision? So you need good comms, right? You need good comms. You need everyone being calm. And I'll talk a little bit about that now. My clicker doesn't like my fingernails, sorry. So this military model was brought into the US military in the 1990s. I joined in 1990 as a sapper, and this was the model I was taught. So I do tend to go to it. It's probably outdated, but I do go to it. So there is an automatic assumption in the military that the world is chaotic and crazy, right? And you've got to navigate that. So it's volatile. The world is absolutely volatile. It's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. You have to accept that as a norm. So if you take that to a cyber security operations center, you take that to your people out there, in the field, if they accept that this is the norm, this is going to help them with their resilience. It's going to help you with shifts and rosters and what you need to do in that space as well. So how do you navigate that? Well, you can see there, you need a purpose. You have to keep reminding yourself, why am I here? What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? Because when it's volatile, the brain can get completely crazy and fire off, little missiles in your brain, and it can get confused. So you have to remind yourself of what are we trying to achieve? Why are we here? Why do we exist? The next thing is the uncertainty. Now we need certainty. We need facts. We need to know what the risks are, right? So uncertainty we should be comfortable with. We should be able to do risk assessments on the fly. The clarity, we need the playbooks. We need to be able to have them practice. We need the systems thinking. We need the scenario planning. And we really need clear information at all times. And we don't always have all the information at our fingertips, right? So we have to be able to make good decisions quickly without all the information that we could possibly have. And then agility. We need innovation and adaptability because the enemy is always changing. And I talked before about the polymorphic malware. That's a really good example, right? Where you have to be able to keep adapting to their adaptation and flexibility. So the VUCA model is one that's easy to remember, right? Because it's VV, UUCC, so you can remember that one. So in action, what does that actually mean? There's a whole lot of words there. And so how do I use it with my teams? Decision making doesn't always improve with more data, and that goes against AI, right? Which tends to, unless it's poisoned, it tends to. It's actually the opposite. Sometimes you just have to make a decision. You don't have all the data. Active questioning. So you have to be asking all the right questions and encouraging people to ask questions, not just active listening and all sitting there passively. You do need active questioning. Don't optimize the plan, optimize the planner. So I'm all for getting the planner to be able to feel that they can change direction, they can do a new plan, they're not set in stone, they can move, they can think of new creative ways to do things. The next one is basically about calm. Keep everybody calm. You know, sometimes I feel like a kindergarten teacher when I'm on an incident response. There was one recently in Korea where I jumped on and I had about 4 or 5 people on the bridge. And then about 4 minutes later, there was 50 people on the bridge. I was like, and they were all talking over the top of each other and they were all trying to solve it. And I had to go, everyone just calm, just calm. And then I had to come in over the top of them and go, everyone, I feel like telling you to put your hands on your head, but everyone, turn your speaker off now. And I had to do that, and I really felt like a kindergarten teacher. They were really, really in there, or panicking, or trying to solve the problem. Yes, there's playbooks and things, but it's not always clear sometimes, and that's why you've got to keep doing them about who has to make what decision under what pressure. Interesting, in Australia, I don't usually get that. Everyone kind of just sits there like this and just waits to see if someone else is going to take the risk or the responsibility. Sorry, but that's my experience. We need to be agile, right? Encourage innovation. We have to do that. And that's even, you know, in the warfighting space, they're very much about encouraging innovation. There are models and structures, but yes, you can be innovative. And the train people talked about muscle memory, making sure that those playbooks and things are up to date. How many times we hear that you have to do these simulations and these exercises, and the other day I was with a customer and I said, you know, have you done your playbooks and exercises, and re-looked at them, and yeah, we've done that. Who did you do it with? The executive. What about the technical team? Oh, no, they'll be fine, they know what they're doing. No. The technical team is probably more important than your executive for you at the coalface right now, particularly if you haven't done it with them and they're a fairly new team and they don't know each other very well. You need to do that with them. So just keep doing it. And creating a risk-tolerant culture, right? That's absolutely vital, because you need to understand that you can't protect everything. And we know that in cyber, but we have to create that culture. Now, this one's a bit harder to read. This is a military model from SPADE, which is a conference of military decision makers that get in with some of the big tech companies in the world and make decisions. This one was rolled out in a conversation about being under pressure with AI. So you can see, you know, what do we need to make a good decision? Multiple source verifications, not just one source, right? And we run around and focus on that source. We need multiple sources. The reputation and the verification. And this is all the thing the soldier has to think about, right? And this is the thing that your people and yourselves have to think about on the fly. Corroborating with known facts. Does that actually ring true with what I know? Because it could actually be part of a cyber attack. Technological verification. So making sure the technology can actually back you up and help verify. And I love this one, healthy skepticism. I often talk about being politely paranoid, but healthy skepticism I think is great. This is built into an Australian military model, Australian-US actually military model. Chain of command use protocols. Now obviously that's military. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I like people to use chain of command in my teams as well. It reduces confusion. Of course they can jump up the chain of command, but in chaos and confusion in a world of the VUCA, right, we need that. And then real-time updates and adjustments, so we have to keep updating because more information will come through. We're trying to make a decision. Everything's firing at us all at once. And then, again, I love this one, reflection. So before we press the button, before we actually do something critical, let's just take a moment to reflect. It's so important. So that's a model there that's used. It was introduced about 2 years ago, and it is used and taught to the warfighter. This one I won't go into too much detail on, but this is a traditional one. It's a typical military one. It's very, very step heavy and focused, and it's not working in the world of AI. So it's called the military decision model making process. But I wanted to show you that they've been looking at this for a long time. This one, the OODA loop, I think is very simple. Observe, orient, decide, and act. That's what we do every day. We don't even think about that. However, I like the orient bit at this, right? So we can observe, and sometimes people jump to decide and act. Let's just orient. And I think you can see in the previous one I talked about in SPADE, there's a bit of a theme here, right? So reflection, healthy skepticism, orient could probably fit into that little green box there. Okay, so I'm coming to the end there, and one of the things I like is that I don't just get up here and yap at you. You can actually go and take some stuff with you. So I think what would be helpful is to socialise with your team that AI is here to stay. They probably know that, but assume the threats will escalate, and it's not something to panic about or get stressed about. Get them to adopt a mindset and an approach to deal with it. I do like VUCA because VUCA assumes everything's stuffed up, right? And then you need to actually move from that. I always wrap it into something very simplistic for the team. Discuss the idea of decision-making models. Go out and find, there's heaps of others out there. There's not just military ones or people under pressure. But could you apply or take any of those to your teams? How could you adopt better innovation? The next one's a bit repetitive, sorry. How can you introduce a healthy risk tolerance in your organisation? What's the risk appetite, not just of your executive, but of your team? And how much do you let them innovate? You got the playbooks and things, but how much do you actually let them go and add their own information or data into it or adapt them as they go? A really good one I've seen is in incident response, where people go straight to the signal group rather than the official teams, because they just quickly grab all the people that they know that they trust, and they just ignore all the others, and then they work offline and then plug back into teams later. So what we do is try and grab all those people on those contact lists that they were using, because they shouldn't be using Signal, and reflect and learn, and then build that into the next playbook. But learn from the people and what they're doing. The OEM AI tools, please lift under the hood. Do not trust. Go in there and ask a million questions. If you want help, I've got a really great guy that will go in there, and he just doesn't want anyone buying a million things, which I see happen all the time, and we have to try and reduce that footprint. And then how can you give your people better license, right, to help them under pressure? And can you actually workshop with them? What can we do to take some of these decision-making models forward so that we can improve how you're going to be able to respond? Because the world of cyber is under more and more threat. The threats are escalating. Hopefully the example in Kashmir can give you a real-life example of where running 2 security operations teams where we hadn't really thought about that. I mean, they were in there, but I've had to go in and do a whole lot more to be able to upskill and uplift those as well. So that comes to the end of my presentation. I hope there were some things there that you can take from it. I do hope to go next technical deep dive once I get the approvals from the military. But you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or anywhere, and I'm happy to have a chat. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kylie. Here's a gift from AUSCERT. There was actually a question. You've got one quickly. The question was, I don't know if it came on the screen. I did. Have you ever seen AI drive the risk-based decision-making process?
AI drives the response, right? So AI does drive people to panic a bit more, and I do see that in terms of escalation. I do see AI being awesome in terms of being able to put in and get options, and then to be able to use and work those options. So to put in and go, we've got that with Swimlane and with Stellar Cyber, that you can go in there and you can actually say to them, I've just seen this, what are my options? And then what are the risks on those options, and what do you think I should do? I always say you need the human intervention on that though, so it can spit out what it thinks is happening in that environment on the SOAR platform, but you actually need to then go and check that before you enforce it. If that answers it.
Excellent. You're a very, very busy lady. So, and obviously you're outside. You can talk outside more candidly, perhaps, with people. So yeah, please thank Kylie again.
Thank you.